This one's a little bit heavier. This one's called Sweet Blasphemy.
Just 2 days after his 18th birthday, Andy Sixx had made the decision of dropping out of high school and moved to Los Angeles, California to attempt to eventually live out his lifelong dream of becoming a successful musician. Now, being 18 years old in a brand new city, trying to get your start in music sounds pretty much impossible. But thankfully, Andy had experience, playing shows and writing songs back in Ohio that kind of made his chances of starting a new kind of project a lot easier. Now, he felt like there was only one song he could use to debut Black Veil Brides onto the Los Angeles music scene, but we're not quite there yet. The very first thing Andy had to do was to find members to appear in his music video. He decided to settle on guitarist Chris Blueser, who went by, and actually still does go by the stage name Chris Hollywood, and drummer Sandra Alva-Goreta. That is definitely not how you pronounce it. Alvarenga. Yeah, this person right here. Who actually, I'll probably just, if I have to say her last name again, people call her Sandra Alva, so I'm either just going to say Alva or just Sandra. And now with this trio that Andy had put together, Black Veil Brides can now begin work on their official debut as technically a new band. Before we get into Andy debuting Black Veil Brides in Los Angeles, though, let's go back a bit to when Andy was still in Cincinnati. Throughout 2008, the Ohio version of Black Veil was actually going through a bit of a sound change. So instead of the glam punk kind of sound that they initially were playing as, or however you want to say that, they actually started releasing songs on their MySpace that sounded completely different to their initial, Motley Crue mixed with the Misfits kind of sound, and actually sounded more like bands like Avenged Sevenfold or Under Oath. Now, the first song of these was The Gunsling, which was a very Avenged Sevenfold-esque, straightforward metalcore song that Andy had initially brought to California with him, and ended up actually playing this song on the first Black Veil Brides tour, but it didn't end up making it onto We Stitch These Wounds. The second song was actually an old version of We Stitch These Wounds, which is actually completely different to the version that made it onto the We Stitch These Wounds album. This version was a lot heavier but less intricate than the one on the album. The only thing that is the same about these two versions are the vocal melody and the lyrics.
Below 2 months is all the same. I beg for this man's approval, like all the rest of dying fame. Well,
The third song is the original Mortician's Daughter, which is pretty much the exact same as the album version. And then the final song that was recorded in Ohio is the subject of this chapter. And so 1 year later, on the day of our Lord, June 17th of 2009, Black Veil Brides would release the iconic music video for the final song of the Never Given EP, I guess you would say, being Knives and Pens. As I said, this video is pretty iconic to any emo kids or just any kids that followed the Warped Tour post-hardcore scene in the early 2010s. Despite Andy and Black Veil Brides not having that many fans, the video actually blew up when it came out. By March of 2010, which was, a few months before We'd Stitch These Wounds had actually dropped, it had amassed over 7 million views, and to this day has over 130 million views on the official video on YouTube, making it the second most viewed Black Veil Brides music video to date. Something interesting is that over the years, people have actually commented how there's no bass player in the actual video for Knives and Pens. And Andy had actually revealed years and years later that there was...
I remember that there was supposed to be a bass player in the music video. And there's only... It's myself, Chris Hollywood, and Sandra Alva. And there was Alan, who I found on MySpace. Alan, if you're watching this, I've talked about Alan before. I don't have any contact with him. I found a guy on MySpace named Alan who was supposed to be the bass player in the video and then would have, I guess, gone on to be the bass player in the band. Because when I put the band together for the video, the band didn't exist in that context. I basically said, hey, do you want to be in my band? Let's do a video, to both Chris and Sandra and Alan. Alan was there the night before. We did the whole rehearsal, went through it. Alan had his white clothes. Alan's girlfriend's dog was sick in San Jose. And so Alan flew to San Jose, which I totally understand. Never heard from Alan again. He was not in the video. I don't know what Alan's doing these days.
So honestly, who knows if, that story actually, was true, if he had to actually go back. Because that kind of sounds like a story you would make up if, you really didn't want to do something. You had to, figure out a reason to, ditch on it last minute, So now Black Veil Brides had made their debut and gained a lot of hype online, but as you could see is that there was only 3 members in the band, and honestly, who would want to see a 3-piece metalcore, post-hardcore kind of band? So Andy had decided to recruit some new people. So in addition to Chris and Sandra, he had recruited a man who I'm just going to refer to as Pan, because his full stage name has a word that some people don't really like, and I'm not trying to offend anyone, so this person's just going to be known as Pan. So he recruited Pan to play guitar, and then who would have eventually became longtime bassist Ashley Purdy, who I understand some people have some very strong feelings towards because he has kind of done some stuff that not many people that are kind of think is a big no-no. And knowing the internet, there's probably some people that are gonna want me to, talk about it. But we are going chronologically in Black Veil Brides' history, and that stuff had not really come out. That became public information until he had left back in 2019. So I promise I will talk about everything with Ashley Purdy, but right now it has not happened yet. So you're going to have to wait until the final episode of this series. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe. Such a fucking whore for myself, god damn it.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's Andy, and I am very pleased and happy to announce Black Veil Bride's newest members. We have Pan and Ashley. We've been working really hard. We've got all kinds of new tracks and lots of news coming up, but I want to let Ashley and Pan tell you guys a little bit about them.
Speaking of Ashley, though, let's go through his background as a musician, since he is a longtime member with that kind of information available. I did want to do this with all Black Veil Brides members, but people like Pan and Chris and the people from Ohio, they don't really have that kind of stuff on the internet, and or just don't really have interesting enough stories to warrant this kind of segment towards. So, Ashley Purdy, he was born in a small town in Missouri called Berger in 1979, and he is actually claimed to be the only member of Black Veil Bride's classic lineup to not have experienced some kind of bullying in high school like the other members had, claiming that he was actually quite popular in his school and his town because of how different he was to anybody else. Also, he lived in like a small town of 200 people, so you know, what's really the point? You might as well just be friends with the weird kid or whatever. Much like Andy, they both shared the dream of moving to California and becoming rock stars, basically. And he initially moved to San Francisco at age 18, mainly because he didn't know the difference between San Francisco and LA. Keep in mind, he was born in 1979 and grew up in a small town, so he really knew the difference. But while he was in San Francisco, he ended up enrolling into the Academy Art College, where he had previously squatted in their dorms. And I don't mean like, you know, doing squats in the dorm rooms. I mean, yeah, that's stupid. And he just overall done whatever he could to get by. He then transferred to Otis College in Los Angeles after he figured out that if he wanted to make it in music, that he had to move to Los Angeles because San Francisco is not really a city you want to be for that kind of stuff. Right away, he had actually started forming bands, mainly with older guys that were from the scene in the 80s and the 90s. Some notable bands that Ashley had started around this time was his first band, Orgasm, who were, from the look of it, kind of just a generic LA glam rock kind of band, with Ashley Purdy's official website stating that they were mainly influenced by Kiss and the New York Dolls. But no footage of them playing, to my knowledge, exists online. And from the looks of it, they only played like 1 or 2 shows. So I don't know if they were like a cover band or whatnot or whatever. Then he did a Shout at the Devil era Motley Crue cover band called Children of the Beast, where he went by Ashley 6, which is, you know, funny to me. You know, Ashley 6, Andy 6, you know. For Orgasm, I believe he sang for them, but I believe this would be the first project where he had actually played bass for. Then after Children of the Beast, in around 2006, he had sang for a band called Stolen Hearts that I actually found some music for, and it's kind of like a mixture of country rock and 80s like heavy metal, kind of like maybe Leonard Skinner meets like Judas Priest or something. And something to actually, that's interesting about Stolen Hearts is that if you look at pictures of them, that they kind of have a similar look to like Wretched and Divine or like self-titled era Black Veil Brides. So, you know, this is probably something that was inspired, that inspired Ashley or something. I don't fucking know. Now, according to some sources I found, Ashley had invited an experienced guitarist and violinist within the Los Angeles scene named Jeremy Miles Ferguson, who went by the stage name Jinxx. I can't really find much information on Jinx's background. I found interviews with him that have since been buried deep into rabbit holes that, I'll be honest, I don't want to dig through again because that would take way too long, but here's what I've gathered about Jinxx. He was born in 1981 in Webster City, Iowa, and he had actually started playing guitar at age 2, like a literal toddler, age fucking 2. That's fucking, I don't know. And he had started gigging with his dad at some bar shows around age 8. And by age 11 had gotten a hold of Metallica's And Justice for All album and learned how to play the whole thing front to back at age 11. Like, what the fuck am I doing with my life, honestly? He had played and toured it with many groups over the years, but I believe the most notable would be Stabbing Westward singers Christopher Hall's side project called The Dreaming, which, fun fact, a year prior to Andy moving to Los Angeles, The Dreaming had actually played with Jinxx in Cincinnati, and Jinxx and Andy had actually played the show, and then Jinxx joined Black Veil Brides, having no idea that Andy was just some 17-year-old kid that he had met a year prior in Cincinnati, which is crazy to think about. Another band that is worth noting is a band called 80 Proof Riot, who with Jinxx had not materialized or even played any shows. But this is actually where Jinxx had met guitarist Jake Pitts, as well as this man named Chris Mora, who will be important in the very near future. But despite all the other projects he's been in, Black Veil is definitely the band I feel like Jinxx needed to be in, because in all his other projects, he's more doing like session or just live kind of stuff. And he wasn't really able to contribute much to that because he was mainly session or live. But he's actually a lot more influenced by classical music, which he was able to bring to Black Veil Brides. Once Jinxx had fully initiated himself into Black Veil, he was quick to find out that he wasn't really the biggest fan of Pan and, you know, kind of talked about leaving the band. And in order for Andy to keep Jinxx in the band, he was forced to kick out Pan, and Jinxx was able to bring in Jake Pitts. But before I go through Jake's backstory, there is something I want to mention about Pan. If you dig hard enough, you'll actually find a project called House of Glass, which was actually started by Pan as well as former Black Veil Brides guitarist Chris Hollywood, and you'll find 2 songs, one called Funeral in Flames and another called Kings Without Crowns. Funeral in Flames, as many old school Black Veil Brides fans know, is actually the original title of the beloved but heavily overlooked We Stitch These Wounds track, Beautiful Remains. And the House of Glass version pretty much just sounds exactly like Beautiful Remains, besides a couple of guitar parts that are different.
We gathered here to sing for you. These words you've written in time that world will forget you, but not what's written. Now rest your weariness. What you live for now is dead.
And Kings Without Crowns sounds pretty similar to Sweet Blasphemy.
All We are one and we are strong. Through pain and strife we've become something more than kings and queens. I leave your crown to bleed. Darkness is all I know.
So I'm not really sure. The oldest uploads I could find of this project were dated before the release of We Stitch These Wounds. So it could be possible that Jake and Jinxx just straight up stole Pan and Chris's songs, or the opposite, that, you know, Chris and Pan were just so pissed about Andy kicking them out that they just decided to, you know, start their own project with and steal some of their songs. But I personally believe in the latter half, because it has been confirmed by Jake that, you know, Pan had not written anything for Black Veil Bride. So I'm kind of leaning towards the second theory, but I don't know. You know, we don't know this stuff, you know. But back to Jake. He was born in Idaho in 1985, but kind of lived on and off there, moving between there, Minnesota, and Hawaii while he was growing up. He had moved to Los Angeles sometime during the mid-2000s and studied at the Los Angeles School of Recording, where he became a certified recording engineer in 2006. Before Black Veil, he actually played for The Perfect Victim, as well as 80 Proof Riot, of course. I already talked about them. But The Perfect Victim, I almost thought I reached a complete dead end with this band. But I actually Googled them, and man, I am glad I Googled them and didn't just leave it at a dead end kind of thing.
From Ed Magic TV.
Hey Jeff, nice to meet you.
And what's your
Jake.
Jake? Okay. So you guys in a group?
Hip hop, R&B. No, just kidding, just kidding.
Don't we look the part?
Yeah, don't we look it?
Skateboarders and maybe rock stars.
A little bit of the rock star. Skateboarding just gives me bruises, basically.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So what's the name of your group?
We're called The Perfect Victim.
Perfect Victim. So who's the lead singer?
That would be myself.
Okay. And what do you do?
I play lead guitar.
Lead guitar.
yeah.
Okay. So where did you guys meet each other at?
Actually through MySpace. The band kind of found each other through MySpace, through the classifieds. We were all in different bands. We were all looking for more dedicated musicians. We kind of wanted to get the pick of the litter of talent, and we're really excited with what we have. Every member has something incredible to bring to the table, so he's an amazing lead guitar.
So what would you call your music? What type of music are you guys?
It's like pretty much just rock and roll. You know, I like to say we sound like Fall Out Boy, Green Day, and Avenged Sevenfold all put together, but yet we don't sound like any of them.
Okay. So who put your outfits together?
Myself.
You put your outfits together?
Yeah.
My mom, you know, still, I can't get her away.
They were actually formed similarly to how Andy had formed Black Veil Brides. They were just a couple of guys who met on MySpace and decided to form a band. They're kind of like maybe a bit heavier version of the pop punk bands that were coming out around this time, and you can actually hear some of Black Veil Brides in their songs, I think, because he had, you know, played solos and all that stuff. I think maybe if Black Veil never happened, maybe Perfect Victim could have been a really big band, but, you know, we never know what happens. I don't know if they, like, broke up or anything, but he had left Perfect Victim at some point, so, and I couldn't find, like, any reasons to why, you know, whatever. Okay, done. I don't fucking know. So after The Perfect Victim, he had met Jinxx and Chris Mora in 80 Proof Riot, and after all of them ended up getting kicked out of 80 Proof Riot, They were kind of just jamming and writing some songs together in hopes of at one point, turning into something. I did already explain how, Jake got into Black Veil Brides. Jinxx didn't like Pan, so Jake joined Black Veil Brides. There. Like, I just explained it again. Now we are in December of 2009. Black Veil Brides with a lineup consisting of Andy on lead vocals, Sandra on drums, Ashley on bass, and Jake and Jinxx both on guitars. Black Veil Brides would embark on their first cross-country tour, starting in Cleveland, Ohio, and ending in Anaheim, California, under the name the On Leather Wings Tour. They had played some shows here and there within the Southern California area, but this would be the first time that both Jake and Jinxx would be on stage together with Black Veil Brides. As well as you could say, this is the official start of the Black Veil Brides journey. From what I've gathered, this tour was only slightly above average for a typical new band's first headlining cross-country tour. Some shows were jammed packed, and then some shows had so little people showing up that they would cancel the show as the show was happening. But who really cared? They put their feet down and said fuck it, left everything behind to make their dreams come to life. After On Leather Wings, they went on the Royal Family Clothing Tour with From First to Last, I Set the Kill, Confide, and Sleeping with Sirens in March of 2010, which, from the little information I could find online, started in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and ended in West Palm Beach, Florida. And now, after all this touring, they can finally enter the studio and record their debut album, We Stitch These Wounds. Now having a deal with independent Cleveland, Ohio-based label Standby Records, Black Veil Brides were ready to enter the studio to start recording their debut full-length album known as We Stitch These Wounds. Something to note during this time is that absolutely nobody besides themselves and the small fan base that they've kind of gathered from the tours and the music videos at the time really cared about this album. Standby was the only label that were willing to sign them. The producer and now manager Blasco, who is actually more known for being the former bassist for Rob Zombie and Ozzy Osbourne, although he believed heavily in the band, was way too busy with other projects such as playing bass for Ozzy's album Scream, as well as engineer Josh Newell recording the Linkin Park album 1,000 Suns. They ended up having to record the album at very weird hours. Andy has even stated he recalls waking up at 4 in the morning to a call from Blasco asking him to come into the studio, saying that it's time for him to record his vocals. They were recording at Clear Lake Audio in North Hollywood, which the band members has described it as primarily a jingle studio, and that's exactly what it sounds like on the record. The studio was made for recording 30-second radio and TV jingles and not a full-length metalcore album. The first single to come out for We Stitch These Wounds was technically the Knives and Pens video a year prior, which the oldest archive I could find had always stated that they were working on an upcoming album, but nearly a year later, on June 8th of 2010, we got another music video from Black Veil Brides, this being the beloved BVB track, Perfect Weapon. There are multiple uploads of the Perfect Weapon video on YouTube. I remember first discovering this song through a YouTube channel called Blank TV. I'm guessing this was one of those channels where smaller bands could upload their videos to kind of to promote themselves. And they have, of course, Black Veil Brides, and they have both the Knives and Pens and Perfect Weapon video, as well as artists like Suicidal Tendencies, Agnostic Front, Five Finger Death Punch, Animals as Leader. The case for the latter two is that you know, they were kind of in the same position that Black Veil were in at the time. They were just like bands with like a decent following that wanted to expose themselves to a bigger platform. By the way, if you're a band wanting to use, trying to look for like a channel to like expose yourself, I definitely don't go for Blank TV. Like, this channel literally has like 750k subscribers, but they can barely reach like 1,000 views per video. So maybe you should look elsewhere if you're trying to use that method of growing your band. But with Black Veil's official upload and the Blank TV upload of this music video, the Perfect Weapon video has been viewed a total of 47 million times, easily making it one of Black Veil Bride's most popular and recognizable songs, still listened to and covered to this very day. About a month after Perfect Weapon, on July 20th of 2010, we finally got We Stitch These Wounds, the first full-length album by Black Veil Brides. And I gotta say, other than the production, if I were around the Black Veil Brides camp back in 2010, I would definitely say this album was worth the wait. Every song on this album goes like way harder than it has to be. Even the slower songs like Mortician's Daughter and Carolyn definitely go with the more aggressive songs on the album, like Beautiful Remains, Heaven's Calling, and of course Perfect Weapon and Knives and Pens. As I said though, this version of Knives and Pens is almost completely different to the music video version we've all probably heard thousands and thousands of times. This new version is in drop C sharp tuning, which is a half step down of drop D D being of course the original tuning that it was in. Jake added some solos, which of course are amazing, but I don't personally think they really fit in the song that much, but it could because I'm used to hearing the original version and I prefer listening to the original version unless I'm doing like a full listen to of the We Stitch These Wounds album, or of course if I'm seeing them live. But despite all of the challenges and difficulties they faced recording the album, all that paid off in the end. No pun intended, we're not there yet, so don't think it's a pun. In its first week, We Stitch These Wounds reached number 36 on the Billboard Top 200 charts and number 1 on the Billboard Independent charts, as well as selling over 10,000 copies in its first week of, you know, the album being out, of course. Which all of that is like absolutely insane for a new band that's only toured maybe twice and didn't really have any fans prior. Apparently this album did so well that Black Veil Bride's merch were selling more than Twilight merch at Hot Topic. And you know you're a pretty big deal in 2010 if your band's merch is selling more than Twilight merch in 2010, because like Twilight was fucking huge in 2010. After the release and the initial success of We Stitch These Wounds, Black Veil Brides would embark on their first cross-country US tour after the release of We Stitch These Wounds, of course, being called the Sacred Ceremony Tour, with Modern Day Escape, Vampires Everywhere, and Get Scared in July and August of 2010.
Shake me some lead guitar.
Although Black Veil Brides were getting so much buzz within the scene, seeing all this immediate success, shortly after both the release of We Stitch These Wounds and the Sacred Ceremony Tour, drummer Sandra Alva had announced that she would be leaving the band and she was going to be joining the band Modern Day Escape, and she wanted to focus on that like full time, which honestly Modern Day Escape are a massively overlooked MySpace era post-hardcore band. If you love the album Dying Is Your Latest Fashion by Escape the Fate, you'll probably fall in love with this band. So with Sandra out of Black Veil Brides, who will replace her? Gee, I don't know. You'll have to find out on the next time. I'm kidding, of course. We all know who will replace Sandra. I just won't get into that until the next episode, which will be on the rise of Black Veil Brides and the BVB Army. So make sure you stick around until the next episode, which will probably be a lot longer than this one. And this one was really fucking long. Jesus Christ. Like, I recorded like 2 separate parts, and the first part was like 30 minutes long. The second one was like 20. Like, holy shit. That's a long fucking episode. So, of course, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next episode of the series whenever I decide to get that out, or just so you don't miss anything else I upload. Make sure you leave a comment if you think I missed something or got something wrong, and if you like the series, make sure you check out the first episode, which will be fucking somewhere up here, because I don't know where the fucking I don't know what they're called. But if you missed it, go click right wherever. And I'll see you on the next one.